All right, and we're live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is Project SIP's 22nd podcast. We are coming to you live from Alex's apartment in Novato. Thanks for joining us again tonight.
We're not all with Alex.
We're not there.
You're not, but
we never have been.
But it's being broadcast specifically here in Novato. So thank you all so much for watching. We've got a lot to get into tonight. We've got a much smaller panel. So tonight's probably going to be a slightly shorter episode than you're usually used to. We usually go about 2 hours. Thinking about an hour tonight. Sounds about right. With that, let's jump right into it with our first segment of the night, which is This Week in Joe Biden. And for that, I'll go to Tyler. Tyler, how's Joe Biden doing?
I mean, Joe is doing pretty okay in terms of his approval rating. He's averaging, according to 538, right around 54%. But he does have a lot of polls that put him in the mid 60s. So he's about 20 points higher than Trump was at this time in his presidency. But he's still a little lacking compared to Obama and Bush and Clinton in terms of approval ratings. But the fact that with how divided politically everybody is here in this country right now, the fact that he has a majority of people that think he's doing a pretty okay job, that's an improvement for sure. I mean, I know we said this in the last podcast, but just the fact that I'm not scared to see the notifications that come through on my phone. And I know this is the same for everybody. It's just my Twitter feed is so much cleaner now. I don't have to worry about what did the president put up in terms of a tweet this morning at 5 o'clock in the morning while he was rage tweeting on the toilet. Don't have to worry about that. But it's been a very refreshing last couple weeks. And oh, by the way, it is Black History Month too, so you know that makes it even it makes it fun. It makes it great that we can actually enjoy Black History Month this time and not come up with like the 1776 panel or something stupid like that in the middle of February. So I'm happy.
Yeah, well said, man. Well said. I gotta say, it has been refreshing. We've gone almost a full month now, without having to worry about looking at tweets or worrying about like what foreign leader that Trump might piss off the next day and stuff. Man, it's been refreshing, and it feels like a huge weight has been lifted to a certain extent. Let's go to Kylan next.
Positive.
Kylan, how do you think Biden's doing?
You know, I'm very happy. My Facebook feed is much happier. Just looking at what he's been doing on all three phases, from the executive orders reversing a lot of the atrocities of the Trump administration, from the new executive orders that actually have heavy emphasis on helping the American people, to immediately staying focused and steadfast on getting this COVID relief bill. I'm actually very impressed that, he made the bipartisan overture. But then when the GOP came back with their screw you bill, I'm glad he immediately pivoted and said, you know what, hey, we're going this alone. I'll talk a little bit more about this later.
Yeah, I was gonna say, we got a whole segment dedicated to that one. So
and also, he just met with a bipartisan group of senators today to start having informal conversations about infrastructure. So, I'm very happy about what's going on. I think it's a great start. Like you said, I'm glad that I don't have to worry about what's going on with his Twitter feed, what insurrectionists are being incited, what blasphemous stuff is being, said. I just want to wake up in the morning, brush my teeth, eat some breakfast, go to work and, not have cold sweats at night. So it's been nice.
I love it, man. Let's go to Amanda, last but not least. How do you think Joe Biden's doing?
I think he's doing as best as he can under the circumstances with what he was left, especially with respect to the pandemic and a lot of the problems that the Trump administration just has either failed to address or failed to adequately address over the last year. From what I recall, Biden's approval rating right now amongst voters is pretty good. I don't have the number in front of me, but it's, I think it's more than some people thought it was going to be. And I think that he is going to just continue to improve because he actually has concrete plans and intelligent people with the appropriate level of expertise advising him and working for him and speaking on his behalf. So I'm very optimistic, and like everyone else, I'm fairly happy, to not to wake up and see just, what horrible things have happened today on my phone.
I agree. Couldn't agree with you more there. Ladies and gentlemen, we've got a poll up right now. We want to know from you guys, how's Biden doing so far? The two answers are good and bad. There's no in between there, so you got to pick one. To Randy Powell in the chat says, hi, Alex. What's up, Randy? And to Charles in the chat, sorry I didn't make it tonight. The second vaccine is tough. Our thoughts and prayers go out to you, man. I hope you recover quickly.
I get my second vaccine in like 2 weeks. So
Just
I'll be in the same boat, Charles.
Talk to Charles. He'll know what to expect. So
my sister had the second shot a couple weeks ago, and she was feeling pretty crappy for a couple days, but it turned out to be okay.
Yeah,
that's good. I'm hoping to time mine for like a weekend.
Definitely heard it's pretty common, but of course there's plenty of disingenuous people out there that will say that's the poison they're
I mean, that's the point. That's the whole entire thing you want. You want to have some kind of a response, because if you don't have a response, then it's not working the way that it was intended. It's intended to give you some inflammation, some immunity response, so your body knows what to fight the next time it sees it.
Yes, your body knows to fight the Bill Gates microchips.
True.
But I have a microchip in this device.
Yeah,
right here, I don't with me all the time.
I don't get this, because if the government actually wanted to track or control people, there's so many other ways in which they can do that. I mean, they could
do that.
Listen,
and already do it.
I mean, for one, welcome our new microchip overlords. So.
But I mean, there's even some people, I mean, I had a couple arguments this week with people, like they just think that everything to do with this vaccine is bad, no matter what you tell them. All vaccines are bad. They have carcinogenic
carcinogenic.
Thank you.
Politicization, yeah.
Carcinogenic things in them, and formaldehyde and all this stuff, because they only look at the specific things that they want to fear, and they don't really care what's in the COVID vaccines, because the COVID vaccines are completely different than any vaccine that we've had primarily before. And then they're like, oh, well, we haven't tested it, we're just trying to rush it out there. Well, it's kind of crazy, because they've been actually doing a lot of research on this before. This was kind of the basis of what the MERS vaccine was going to be before it kind of fizzled out and didn't go as big as they thought it was going to be. And it's great for us for future vaccines, for things that, I mean, that would have a bigger impact on life, like cancer, HIV, I mean, Alzheimer's. I mean, if we can get vaccines for those things, because of the research in which we've gotten here and the success that we've had here, it would help our life expectancy so much more. But people don't look at the vaccines like that because of their success that we've had over the last century. I mean, if you walked around and saw people walking with a limp because they had polio or they had measles or smallpox or whatever from the last century, I mean, I think our grandparents are probably the last people that have known people that have been dealing with that. And our generation doesn't remember that. I don't know anybody that's had smallpox or measles or I mean, any of the things that we've had, tetanus, mumps.
So what you're saying, Tyler, is vaccines work?
Well, but that's the great thing, because they work. We have all these people that think that they don't need them. Yeah, they work.
And then you have a group of people who they see the immune response to the first or the second vaccine, and they're like, "That's a vaccine injury. You need to report it. You need to sue." When I got the first vaccine a couple of weeks ago, I ended up with a delayed hypersensitivity response, which meant I had redness and swelling on my arm a week later. And it was itchy and it was like tender, but that's normal. Yeah. And that's my body responding to the virus. And even if it had stayed there forever, I'd rather have a red mark on my arm forever than COVID. And it just reminded me of like, my dad has a smallpox vaccine scar and he wears it like a badge of honor.
I mean,
Like, I'm vaccinated.
yeah, for real. I mean, look, my thing is, look at any big pharma commercial. Look at any big pharma commercial that we're bombarded with every day, all day, that we're so numb to, we don't even pay attention to it. You know, for acne, for Viagra, for AIDS medication, for antidepressant medication, for headaches.
Diabetes.
You know, side effects include stomach ulcer, possible death, heart attack, some, bleeding up this. I mean, the damn side effects are a mile long and are some pretty gnarly side effects. Nobody bats an eye. But you get any sort of mild, minor side effect from a vaccine, Bill Gates is going to get you, the establishment, the cabal. Urgh.
Well, I mean, the whole entire thing with that, it kind of reinforces some of what anti-vaxxers say, is that the healthcare industry is just made to push you to be chronically ill, essentially, and take hundreds of pills a day. I mean, maybe not hundreds, but a good handful of pills a day just to stay alive and everything like that. It's actually not healing you, it's actually doing the complete opposite and actually making you sicker. So I mean, it's unfortunate, but I hope that people can see that these things are working. The infection rates are down. Right now, I mean, across the nation, we're down 50% in terms of actual infection rates. So that's huge. And I mean, I look forward to the plans that Joe Biden has coming up for this, getting the vaccines out and everything. So it's going to be a fun couple months. We're going to get starting to look toward the future in terms of getting back to normal and everything.
Yeah, I think his plans, I mean, well, they're a vast improvement on Trump's, because Trump apparently didn't have any, it turns out. They didn't have any plans to properly distribute the vaccine or help states or help, hospitals or anything like that. And didn't have a plan, didn't have the stockpile that they claimed they did. There were, I don't even know how many millions of doses of vaccines that the Biden administration were told had been purchased and were not. So I think it's a really good thing that he's, actually stepping up, making a plan, reaching out to, pharmacies like Walgreens, Safeway, CVS. I know that you can get a vaccination appointment at CVS now online, just their website. And I think that it's going to start really ramping up how many people are vaccinated in the next 6 weeks. And so I'm really hopeful that more people can be vaccinated by the summer than we thought they might have been a few months ago.
Totally. And by then, I mean, sorry, Colin. And by then we may even have the Johnson & Johnson and AstraZeneca vaccines.
I mean, theirs aren't particularly effective. The only thing those two vaccines are really good at, apparently, is preventing transmission, because I've had the first vaccine. I'm 50% protected by Moderna now, but I can still get it. I can still catch it. Once I get my second dose, I can still get it. I can still catch it, and I can still give it to other people, even if I don't get sick.
So Johnson & Johnson and the AstraZeneca viruses, they were studied, and they're 60. Did I say it again?
Yes.
Yeah. So they're less effective. They're less effective overall, but slightly more effective than the first dose of the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, because it's what, 62 or something, or 65% effective.
Yeah.
But that one and the Oxford AstraZeneca one, that is the most effective at preventing transmission to other people once you're vaccinated.
Which is good, especially given the fact that the South African variant is I think they're saying almost twice as
transmittable.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole entire thing about that is people are like, oh, why are we freaking about mutations of the virus now? Well, there have always been mutations. That's kind of how they were able to track it going across.
Why you need a new flu shot every year.
It's why you.
And I think that's what's going to happen with this. I think we're going to have booster shots every year, just like flu season. And I think, I don't remember what his role was, either the CEO or some big guy at Johnson & Johnson came out and said the same thing.
But, and I'll get back to my thoughts on the Johnson vaccine, but I don't know if we'll necessarily have to have a booster every year for this, but it's more of like, are people who catch it going to have adverse side effects to COVID, to where they have to go to the hospital, or there are going to be overwhelming amounts of people having to go to the hospital? That's kind of what we need to prevent. If we can prevent that, then this will be just like a normal flu season and it's fine. So if a majority of people can prevent from getting too sick that they have to go to the hospital, they'll be fine. But as in terms of the Johnson vaccine, I don't think anybody here is necessarily going to get it. I mean, we're, as some people came up with in the last century, we're a first world country in the West, so we can afford to have things such as the Moderna and the Pfizer vaccines. The Johnson vaccines are going to go to places like the subcontinent, Africa, in some, even South America, where you have people that are lower income, poverty stricken, or they just don't have the ability to keep the vaccine cold, which is another advantage of having AstraZeneca or Johnson & Johnson, is they don't have to be in cold storage.
But to be clear, and for our viewers specifically, the AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson vaccines are deactivated virus, though, not mRNA, correct?
Yes, they are. So that's one of the reasons why they only need one shot and they're less effective. But of course, the mRNA vaccines weren't expected to be as high as they are, because as Amanda said, the flu vaccine has an efficacy rate around 50 to 55%. So they were expecting the vaccines to be right around there. So it's amazing that the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines are like that, with as low of an allergy or side effect rate. Granted, there are still side effects. People have had them, but I mean, compared to the virus and getting it and dying from it, it's
and
so
people
much
were
less.
saying, I remember Fauci very early on in the process when it came out that that Pfizer, I think, was like 92% effective or something like that. Fauci hailed that as like a miracle, because he was only expecting like 60% efficacy at one point or something like that, I remember. But anyways, I want to go quickly to an audience question here. This is from Jake O'Donnell in the chat. How do you guys feel about the potentially deadly long-term ramifications of the significantly reduced flu count this year? People aren't keeping up immunity, and with that, flu can be a terrible issue. And for that, I'll go to Amanda.
So I don't know if it's an issue of not keeping up immunity, because I read somewhere recently that flu vaccinations were actually significantly increased this year than in previous years. And so that's part of the reason why the flu season has been a lot less impactful this year. I think another reason is masking, social distancing. People are working from home, people are quarantining, people are washing their hands more, being more mindful. So the virus just isn't spreading the way it once did, or the different variants that are out there right now. I don't think that we're going to have some surge next year when things open back up that's going to end up with things being more deadly. I think it's just going to be more of what we would normally see with a flu season, unless, as people have predicted, we're still masking, social distancing, et cetera, due to lack of herd immunity for COVID. So I don't think there's going to be deadly ramifications. I think there's just going to be a normal or further reduced flu season in the coming years.
The only reason why it would be a worse year is because some variant came up that we haven't been exposed to before.
Yeah.
But that could happen in any year. That doesn't necessarily mean COVID is the reason for that.
I mean, H1N1, there was that one that, was one of Obama's pandemics, right?
Yeah, H5N3, I think, is a Spanish flu. So, I mean, these are variants that come up all the time, and they just happen to be something that we're not ready for. So it will be okay.
Yeah. And ultimately, the flu shot every year is just a cocktail of vaccines where they're like, which strains do we think are going to be prominent this year? They can be completely wrong, which is why people can still get the flu after they've gotten the flu vaccine.
Yep.
So.
And this
Quick,
gives me feel a hell of a lot better too, though, because to now that we have a CDC that doesn't have, the boot on their neck to suppress information or water down guidance or water down language, we can get back to the CDC being the gold standard in scientific research, that not only the United States but the world looks to.
And recently they recommended double masking for the first time.
That they did.
Do you think that would have happened during the Trump administration?
Absolutely not.
I don't think so. Quick update on our poll here. How's Biden doing so far? 8 of you answered good. 2 of you answered bad. For those of you who answered bad, we'd love to hear from you in the comment section. Guys, are we about wrapped up on the vaccine topic? Are we ready to move on? Or
I thought we had a couple of more things we wanted to talk about vaccines.
Vaccines,
there's something about schools.
Yeah, we wanted to talk about schools and how. I mean,
I'm just seeing it now. Sorry, guys. Let's go to that next. So on the topic of school, which you guys mentioned and reminded me about, a lot of people think it's too soon for kids to be returning to school, especially because of all the super spreader events that have been happening recently. People think, aren't schools the next super spreader? And as our resident father here, I'd like to go to Kylan for this question. Kylan, is it too soon for kids to be returning to school?
I think for me, I think this boils down to the comfort level that people feel. The CDC has just come out, recently and said that, teachers don't need to be vaccinated to be able to reopen schools safely. There's data out there that reopening schools isn't going to lead to super spreader events and things like that. But I think it's really up to each parent how they feel and how safe they feel about their kids going back to in-person school. So I think that's more of a personal thing. Me personally, I would like to see educators and school staff be vaccinated. I think they deserve to be able to have the peace of mind. And I think it's very unfair that teachers unions and teachers are getting vitriol and getting blamed for schools not reopening because a lot of teachers have died. A lot of teachers across this country have already died of COVID. Teachers, principals, janitors, lunch ladies, people have died. And so I think they have a natural right to want to be protected. And so I'm glad to hear that teachers are going to be coming up in the vaccination schedule very soon. And I think they should, because I think that they're essential. I also am very confident, that once this COVID bill is passed, that's going to have additional resources for school districts, for PPE, for ventilation, to have proper social distancing. I think schools should be reopening based on that, having the resources that we need. So to answer your question, I think it's still a little bit too soon, but I think we're trending in the right direction. I want kids in school. I want my kids in person school. I have 2 freshmen. They need to be in school, to me. But I think it needs to be done right. And I like what the administration is doing, trying to toe that line. But we only have one shot to do this safely and to do it the right way.
Absolutely. And Kylan, if I may, how have your kids been learning during this time?
So they've been strictly Zoom since shelter in place started. They haven't stepped foot in a school since 8th grade, for my younger ones. And, my oldest, most of his senior year was virtual as well. But they've adapted pretty well. We try to do a lot of things as a family to do things together and be together and spend time together so they don't go stir crazy. And, they got plenty of, they got tablets, they got laptops, they got video games, they got TVs, they got movies, they got Netflix, they got HBO Max. So, and they have 2 parents, a 2-parent household. So I think they're in pretty good shape, but I do wish that they could have that ability to be social like kids should be having, because I know that a lot of kids and families are hurting from this. I know that there's a lot of suicides and I know there's a lot of depression. And so I understand that. let me tell you, I've had days where I've had, some borderline depression and some borderline anxiety because I miss being around people and I miss hanging out as an adult. So I can only imagine how kids feel. I can only imagine for parents of, preschoolers and kindergartners. How the hell is a kindergartner and a first grader or a second grader, supposed to learn via Zoom? Come on, kids got to go and run around. They got to sweat. They got to run around and they got to play. They got to learn how to interact. These are first 5 formative years. And so I understand both sides, but if I have to choose, I want to make sure that these teachers and parents can be alive to raise and rear these kids over the long term, because I think that we can catch up. That's what summer school is for. That's what enrichment is for. We can catch up, but you can't catch up from death.
And ultimately, you know, us four are lucky. We got the high school, the college experience of being able to like hang out with people in person and party and all that stuff, and they're missing out on a lot of that, and it bums me out. So I was talking to my mom about this the other day, and and she was telling me like she doesn't know what she would do if Austin and I were both either middle school or high school aged at this point and had to go through all of this while that was going on. And so Tyler wanted to add something real quick. Go ahead.
I just wanted to say I think it should be a choice for sure to have. If you want to send your kids back to school, send them back to school. Otherwise, they can learn remotely if you don't feel like you're comfortable with them being home at this point. Just because we know about what's going on more with COVID, we're more understanding of the transmission rates and how it's transmitted. But we need to get the kids back into school for sure. And obviously we need to do it safely. And, we had listened for the last 6 months, somebody saying, we just need to get the kids back in school. We just need to get them back in school. Well, yeah, we need to get them back in school. We agree, but we need to do it safely and get them in there. And it's sad that there are kids that have gone to new schools that don't even know their classmates in person, and the interaction that we all have socially by doing that. It's sad, but that's here in California. I mean, if you go outside of California, if you go to Georgia or you go to South Carolina or West Virginia or any of those, they're open. They're open for school, even in places that are liberal bastions such as New York and in New Jersey. They give kids the option to go to school, and if they go to school, they go to school like normal. So we need to figure out a way to do that here. Even here, it shouldn't be a year into this and schools are still closed and we haven't been able to figure it out.
I agree. I want to go to I want back to you, Tyler, for a second here. It looks like you had a question in the comment section that was directed towards you.
Cool.
Daniel Levy in the chat says, how can we justify giving people a choice when we've seen the results of quote unquote giving people choices about COVID over the last year? I'll let you answer that one if you're ready.
Well, I mean, we can give people choices about COVID. I mean, as long as you know your risks and what's going on, that's okay. But there are certain things that we have to do as a society to protect each other. One of those things is making sure we wear a mask, making sure we social distance, where we try to maintain as much of a distance away from other people as we possibly can. If you want to go to school, if you want to do those kind of things, or if you want your kid to go to school so they can have school lunches, school interaction, basically childcare, because there are still some people that actually do still go to work and they cannot because they have to take care of their kids at home. Which is unfortunate. Why does the schools, that's another point that I don't want to get too much into, but why do schools have to take the bear of all that? But giving people the choice will make them feel better about protecting everybody else. If you don't give them a choice, then they're going to think that they need to not necessarily create anarchy, but they have to give resistance to it. Because if they just fall into it, that will lead into them being coerced into things they don't want to do.
Yeah, well spoken.
And I feel like, Sorry, I was just
wanted
gonna say, I
to give
feel
a
like-
quick update,
oh.
and then I'll go to you, Amanda. We have a poll that says, "Are you comfortable sending your kids to school?" We've got 2 yes votes and 3 no votes as of right now. Just wanted to give that quick update, and then I want to go to Amanda next.
Yeah, that point on coercion, I feel like there was a lot going on lately about teachers feeling coerced into going back when they didn't feel safe. And I don't think teachers in most states are eligible to be vaccinated yet. I know they are in New York. And so I think that that's something we also need to be mindful of is, the teachers. It's not just about the kids. And obviously the kids are important. They are our future after all. But so I, for the past several years, every year I mentor high school students who are interested in legal careers, and I have 2 girls right now, and so we do Zoom meetings, and they're doing everything remote for school. And we were told going into this year's mentorship program that you may have times when your kids have their cameras off, and it's because their home life, there's something going on that they don't feel comfortable showing or sharing. And, so it's hard for some kids to be at home because of that, where school might be their only safe haven. For other kids, it's hard being home because school is the only place where they can get something to eat because their parents are struggling. And obviously there are the kids who don't have the ability to work or do school from home remotely or do it successfully. I mean, I'm just thinking of that kid who is outside of a Taco Bell to use their Wi-Fi on a cell phone or a tablet so he could go to school. And so obviously getting kids back in school is incredibly important, and we need to strike a balance between making sure everybody feels safe. And I think that the schools and the places that have done that most successfully so far are the places that enforce masking, social distancing. I saw one school on the news where the lunch table has a cross of plexiglass so that 4 kids can still sit at the table and be safely separated. So, people just have to, if they can, schools, I know don't always have the resources, just try to get as creative as possible. And again, choice is obviously very important because then people feel heard and they can make a decision that they feel is best for them and their families or their careers.
Yeah. Wow. That's intense. Well, and there is good news on the horizon here, actually. Dr. Fauci, I think, stated earlier today that he believes, at least with the vaccine plan that is currently in place, that open season for vaccines should start this April. And what open season means, obviously, is that anybody who wants a vaccine can get one. I know you've heard that before, but this is actually coming from a competent president now. So just wanted to make that point.
And a happy Fauci. A happy Fauci.
Yeah, exactly. A happy Fauci, not a muzzled Fauci. Nobody likes a muzzled Fauci. So let me see. I'm just looking at our topic list. I want to make sure we're not missing anything here. Am I missing anything, guys, on vaccines?
No.
I
I think that's all we had on vaccines.
I just want to make sure.
Last thing on vaccines.
Go ahead, Matt.
I want everybody to just feel hopeful that, there is definitely light at the end of the tunnel. Right now, the government, the administration is working to get mass vaccination centers around the country. Also,
We did miss something.
They're working in partnership with all of the NBA stadiums and all of the NFL stadiums to make those into mass vaccination centers. So, we're really organizing and getting things together to get people vaccinated. And again, as all of these vaccines are coming online and we're now getting vaccination infrastructure, it just goes to show what a little bit of competence and a little bit of effort goes a long way.
Well said. Well said. That was the last thing on our topic list for vaccine. So now we're officially done. All right. Now let's move on. This is kind of a 180 from that topic here, but with regards to how Joe Biden is doing, we mentioned earlier that Joe Biden currently holds a 54% approval rating, according to 538. But not everyone's happy, even some on the left. So what I've been seeing, at least, a lot of progressives are already jumping on Biden for quote unquote not keeping his promises. So I want to go to Amanda for this one. Amanda, why is Joe Biden being criticized on stimulus checks?
So here's what I've seen. People want $2,000. And they're very much like, well, you told us we'd get $2,000. You promised us $2,000. And wait a second, wait, you're only going to give us $1,400? You're breaking your promises. But if you actually go and look back at what he says, he wanted to bring the total to $2,000. That was the promise. And as much as I believe that we should have been giving people $2,000 every single month for the last year, it doesn't mean that he's breaking a promise, because the last stimulus check was $600. And I may be a lawyer, so I'm not good at math, but I'm pretty sure that 600 plus 1,400 is $2,000. So I think it's really disingenuous to criticize him about that when he didn't say you're going to get a brand new $2,000 check in your pocket.
And you get a brand new car.
I would love a brand new car. Mine has a big, somebody hit my car, there's like a dent in the back.
And to be clear, like,
I mean,
oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish up.
No, I'm just gonna say, and obviously that is very separate than like, we should have been doing this every month for the last year. And, you know, that's a separate issue. But for this particular bill, I just think it's disingenuous for especially a lot of progressives to say, well, we should have gotten $2,000, like this check. Therefore you broke your promise.
Right. And frankly, like, you know, I'm with you on that one. I felt like this pandemic would have been a perfect test case for UBI, especially since, I mean, I don't know how the rest of you guys feel, but I've always thought that UBI is not just an idea, it's an inevitability. And so I always thought, like, you know, at the very least, like $1,000 a month, this would have been the perfect opportunity to really give that a try and put it to the test. But in this particular case, no, it wasn't a $2,000 check. It was a $1,400 plus $600 check. So that was the first thing. The second thing that I wanted to bring up is a common criticism that I've been hearing, at least, is that Biden went and quote unquote froze the insulin and EpiPen rule that lowered prices that was put into place by the Trump administration. Tyler, do you feel comfortable explaining that one, or would you like me to?
I mean, so basically anything that Trump had done in the last 60 days can be put on hold. And that was an executive order that Trump signed within 60 days of going out of office and becoming the former president, which people kind of have a hard time talking about. And Joe Biden has every right to stop any executive order that he put in. So basically, you can't be a president that goes in and says, "Oh, I'm going to make the color blue illegal," and put an executive order for that in the last 60 days of your presidency because you're a lame duck. You can do whatever you want to, because the new administration can be like, "Hey, wait a second, I like the color blue. I want blue to be out there." And so that's basically what Biden did with the drug prices. Actually, he did that with every single executive order.
And that's what I was going to say. It's important to note that every executive order every executive order that Trump had put into place that was scheduled to go in effect after his presidency ended was frozen, pending a 60-day review. So, you know, this idea that Biden went in and just said, "Hey, I hate lower EpiPen or insulin prices," is just patently false. It really just applied to everything, and so that's another one of those disingenuous points that I hear quite a bit.
And I think that kind of stuff gets co-opted by people on the right, and because a lot of that starts there, and somebody sees it, and it's like, "Oh yeah, I agree with that," and then it starts going over into very liberal circles with people that just don't like Joe Biden, which, you know what, Joe Biden's not my first choice. I don't think he was any of our first choices here. And you know, I could say that out of the 81 million people that voted for Joe Biden, I can say a significant majority of them probably were voting against Donald Trump and not for Joe Biden.
100%.
So I mean, you can give him criticisms, but so far, I mean, the criticisms such as that is just disingenuous, as Alex was saying.
I've always said, you know, if Joe Biden is not what I thought he was going to be, I'll be a vocal critic too. You know, no reason not to be. So
can't be accused of supporting Trump now just because you criticize Biden.
Yeah, exactly. The third one I've heard, and if nobody can speak on this, I will, is that Biden won't rejoin the Iran deal without quote unquote unrealistic demands. Go ahead, Kyle. Huh?
Alex, you take that.
You want me to take that? Okay.
Yeah.
So what I had heard on that one is, and I did some research because I saw a Twitter thread about it. Some very prominent progressive had made that like specific criticism. And when I looked into it a little bit more, I found that Biden does want something from Iran. You know what that thing is? For them to comply with the original terms of the deal before the US rejoins it. Is that unrealistic, guys?
That's not unreasonable. That's just basic contract law.
Yeah.
Hey, we'll get back into it if you just get back to what we were doing. But I mean, for Iran, for them, that the thing that I think that they would be worried of, and this is a very good point, is will this all change in 2 to 4 years? And will another president come in and just be like, hey, we're pulling out of the deal again, and we're putting up on all these tariffs?
Frankly, I don't blame any country right now for being distrustful of American foreign policy with how volatile things have been over the past 4 years. So,
well, not just foreign policy, but anything that is either an executive order, an executive action, an executive policy without legislation, or even sometimes Supreme Court jurisprudence to solidify it, the next president can just change it with the stroke of a pen.
Well, sure, but
and that, is
but
not
I mean,
ideal.
foreign policy is the main one, right? Because like, I mean, look at like if Hillary Clinton had been elected in 2016, do you really think she would have gone in and abandoned the Kurds in Syria?
No.
Probably.
Wait, oh, you think she would?
So.
I think she would have evaluated it and come up with a better strategy than just dropping them. But I mean, you never know. She potentially could have not helped there, because we don't know how she would have reacted if she was put in that situation.
Yeah.
So, but again, she would have done it differently than Trump had done with a stroke of a keystroke, I should say.
I guess I think that she probably would have left them there because she realized like, hey, there's a significance to these people who literally were our ground troops in the fight against ISIS. And that's got to count for something, I think. But
I think it would be more of the traditions that were broken over the last 5 years, essentially. And that is scarier to most people in the foreign stage, is like, hey, we expected the US to do this, and we've literally had a light switch go off, and we don't have any of those things anymore. And that's, if I was Iran, I would understand, hey, if I comply with it, great, it'll work for a couple of years, but it will change.
And to add on to that as well, I think aside from some of the things that we've done just policy wise, I think it definitely hasn't comported ourselves well in the last month or so to our allies and enemies alike. When we can, commit insurrection, on the capital of our country and try to overturn a legitimate election.
Wait, Kylan, that didn't happen in America, did it?
Maybe I don't know. Maybe I'm off base. Maybe
oh my God,
we're all just seeing things, but it doesn't give us much
hopes, right?
To talk about democracy when we're not even respecting our own. But one last thing on the Iran deal as well is one thing that's kind of giving me a
by the
little
way, it's Iran, guys. Omid will get mad at you for that.
It's Iran.
Well, about the Iran nuclear deal is that the administration has actually said that not only do they want Iran to, comply before we rejoin, but also work with the P+5 to actually be able to strengthen the deal and try to alleviate and work through some of the, I would say, legitimate criticisms that have come from the original deal, such as like the sunset timetables and other things that can be strengthened. So, we'll see how this goes. It's not going to happen overnight, but I think we need to get a basic baseline of respectability back in the international community before we can really put our foot on the pedal, in dictating.
Real quick, Kylan, can you elaborate for our audience real quick on what the sunset policy is in that deal?
So what the sunset policy is on the Iran nuclear deal is basically the timetable when they no longer have to comply with the the uranium enrichment. And so for a certain defined period of time, Iran has to comply with the Iran nuclear deal and not enrich their uranium up to a certain extent and have a certain number of active centrifuges, and they have to agree to joint inspections by international inspections that have to be signed off, for sanctions relief and economic relief. And so the sunset clause in this original deal, if I'm not mistaken, was 10 years. A lot of people had a problem with that. They wanted that to be longer. And that's something that the administration is talking about looking into when they try to renegotiate terms.
I got you. Thank you for that. Well said. Amanda, can we go to you next?
Yeah. So, I mean, I was thinking about this just in a general sense. A lot of the criticisms coming from the progressive wing of the Democratic Party, and just kind of the most common thing I'm seeing is just general complaints that he's not far left enough, he's not progressive enough. And I keep thinking, like, he's not gonna be. He's never going to be. He is about as moderate as you can get these days in terms of Democrats, unless you want to find Joe Manchin and run him in 2024. But like, no, let's not.
Never gonna happen.
I mean, I'd vote for him over, Donald Trump Jr., who's probably gonna run, but yeah. So I mean, I feel like there's kind of been this like purity test of you have to be this type of Democrat and it has to be progressive in a certain way, because we heard the messaging, well, he has the most progressive presidential platform out of any Democratic nominee in the modern history of the Democratic Party. And yes, that was true, but that doesn't mean he is a progressive or has progressive policies. And I think the struggle too is that because of Bernie Sanders running in 2016 and the popularity that that he and his policies have garnered, it's definitely moved the party left. But I think the harsh criticisms that Biden is receiving about not being progressive enough and not appointing enough progressives to the cabinet and not doing exactly what progressives want on the whole for most of his policies, I don't think that that's fair. And I don't think it's realistic with what we have. The Democratic Party is a spectrum. We shouldn't have two parties. Republican Party is a very wide spectrum these days. You've got Trump, you've got the libertarians, you've got people who've just been fiscally conservative since the 1980s. But we need like 6 different parties. And I don't think it's realistic to say, well, you're the Democratic president, so you have to be one way, because it's just not going to happen.
Right. To Kylan?
I just wanted to follow up on that one. I agree with Amanda that I think it's a little bit unfair of the criticism that Biden is getting for the lack of progressive on his cabinet. When you have to look, if you look a layer deeper, Joe Biden has actually appointed some very progressive people to sub-cabinet positions and agency positions that progressives have actually been very excited about, that I've been excited about. Look at the EPA administrator. Look at the people that he's put on the Federal Reserve. Look at Janet Yellen.
Janet Yellen.
She's progressive in her economic and fiscal policy. And so, people need to take a step back and look at the deeper picture and not immediately get emotional when they don't see exactly what they want on the surface. But I think, there's a lot of progressive people that have been nominated that are in these sub-cabinet roles and agency roles that are going to have a big say, on the direction of the administration and the direction of the country.
I was going to say, the party has moved further left, and that's the reason why Bernie thought he could run again in 2020. And also, we had so many progressives and so many far left candidates in this past election because there was kind of a vacuum. People saw that, hey, the party has moved a little bit further to the left. We need to balance out a candidate such as Joe Biden being a centrist. So, he will have an eventual problem with those who were supporters of people like Bernie or Elizabeth, or Andrew Yang or as such, whenever he said, I'm going to put out an olive branch to you as a progressive, and I'm going to put these people in place, and he doesn't do anything with it, he's going to have a problem with that in later times, at least.
I gotcha. I want to go real quickly to a question that we had in the comment section here. Kylan, you want to take that?
Yeah, and this question is for Charles, from Charles. So with Black people, I have a problem with Biden not addressing the issues of the people that put him in office, and more specifically to Charles's point, what he brought up was, along with Black people and women, the issue of racism and police brutality. He has addressed immigration, LGBT issues, without mention of the aforementioned issues. Just because his cabinet is diverse, does not mean that he's addressed these issues. And so, thank you for that comment, Charles, because I think it's a legitimate, critique. Um, you know, we wind back the clock when Joe Biden was on the ropes after losing Iowa and New Hampshire, and when everybody was writing him off for dead. It was Black voters and Jim Clyburn in South Carolina that saved his ass. When Democrats needed to pull out Georgia in the presidential election, and subsequently in the runoff elections and the special election, it was Black people who delivered Joe Biden the first Democratic presidential victory since, I believe, 1992. And he delivered us 2 Democratic senators, and that was on the backs of Black people, and specifically Black women who
one of which is Black.
Yes, one of which is Black. And so again, Black people and Black women in particular have saved Joe Biden's ass and basically have carried the Democratic Party. And so, I do think, one thing Joe Biden did a great job was, picking Kamala Harris to be his running mate, as a Black woman. But I do think that there needs to be more of a Black agenda. And, I think that he needs to be pushed on the criminal justice issue. I think that he really needs to start coming out front with being aggressive on commutations and pardons. I think he needs to come out aggressively on the disparities in the death sentence. And, it would be my preference for the death penalty to be gone federally. And those are some issues pertaining to Black people. And I think that he needs to speak more, and I think he will, once we start getting to the climate change and infrastructure bill, how economically that Black and brown people and persons of color can have a seat at the economic table. And one thing that I'm happy about is I think his agriculture secretary is starting to have initial conversations about how we can help rural Black farmers, which is a big issue because, rural Americans aren't just white folks. Rural Americans come in all shapes, colors, and sizes. And I think that's an issue that needs to be addressed. And I think infrastructure is going to be a big part of that, especially when we're talking about rural broadband. And also from the Agriculture Secretary, Tom Vilsack, maybe doing some things on cutting back on the big conglomerate farmers and delivering help to our rural and small-time family farmers.
But we also need to remember poor people aren't just Black, too. There are also poor white people out there, too.
Yes,
he said that.
Everybody. And
yeah, I think he said that.
If all poor people actually bandied together and would stop getting so divided, over guns, God, religion, and abortion, and actually came together in their one true economic.
Actually, they did. They came together to buy GameStop.
We're not talking about that again.
No, we're not getting into that. I just wanted to make that point real quick. So sorry, Colin, go ahead.
Hopefully, Charles, my answer wasn't too rambling, but I wanted to, be nuanced in my response. I agree with you that there needs to be more of a focus on the people that got him elected. I do think those things are coming. That's my hope. But if they don't come, we should be on his ass. Thanks, Charles.
I just want to say one thing. I don't think you mentioned it, but I think it's a really good thing that the new Secretary of Defense, Mr. Austin, is working with Joe Biden to examine and investigate systemic racism in the military.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important thing. And hopefully, especially after January 6th, then it turned out, 1/5 of the people who have been arrested. Maybe that number, it's not 1/5, I don't think. It's somewhere like that. Like a significant number of people arrested are military or former military. So I think that is it's symbolic that he is the first African-American or Black defense secretary, and that's a move that he's making. I think it's great.
Very cool. Very cool. Guys, I'm ready to move on to the next segment. I want to talk about the COVID-19 reconciliation bill that's coming into place. And before we get too much into the meat of what's in the bill, I want to go to Kylan real quick. So Kylan, I want to ask you this: what is reconciliation, and why is it different than the normal method of the Congress coming together to pass a bill?
Great question, Alex. So let's start with the normal method that Congress passes bills right now, which is flawed, but basically it takes 60 votes to beat back a filibuster and allow debate and voting to continue on a bill. And so, you bring up a bill, you get hopefully bipartisan buy-in, you get 60 plus votes, you beat back a filibuster, the bill goes and gets voted on. Reconciliation is a way to get around the filibuster. But reconciliation is very specific and narrow in what it can do. Reconciliation has to be based on budgetary matters. So it has to pertain to the budget and spending, and typically can't add to the budget deficit. And so when it goes to somebody called the Senate parliamentarian, they're kind of like the ruling guru. They look at the rules and say, okay, this passes muster and this doesn't. And so what's going on right now with this COVID relief bill is that this is being passed via reconciliation. And a lot of it's going to pass muster. Right now, one of the questions, which is why I brought up the parliamentarian, is that Democrats want to also pass a $15 minimum wage in this reconciliation bill. There are some questions and some doubts that this won't pass muster with the parliamentarian. Now, the Congressional Budget Office just came out with information that said that this will bring millions of people out of poverty, but it will also, they say it would cost 1.4 million jobs and it would add to the budget deficit. Now, what we just talked about with the rule of reconciliation, that it has to be budget related. Well, the CBO just pretty much came out and said that this is going to have an impact on the budget. And what Bernie Sanders, chairman of the budget committee, is doing right now is getting a lot of lawyers to make the case to the parliamentarian that the $15 minimum wage should pass muster. And I think that he has a case to make. So we're moving along now. Where we're at right now with the COVID-19 bill is that it's already been voted on to move forward in the process. And as of right now, the COVID-19 bill is dispersed across the various committees that are in charge of the jurisdictions of each separate parts of the bill. And so the goal is for this bill to be signed into law by President Biden either by the end of this month or the first week in March. And so that's kind of what reconciliation is. It's a way to bypass the filibuster pertaining to budgetary matters. And my hope is once we get this COVID-19 relief bill passed, I know that the president wants to work in a bipartisan basis on infrastructure, but just know that we would actually, if Republicans don't want to play ball and they want to bullshit, we actually have another reconciliation bill that we could do for fiscal year 2022 that we could use to pass the climate change and infrastructure bill via reconciliation again.
So to that effect, actually, I wanted to ask you a follow-up question there. Can you give us an example of another bill that was passed via reconciliation in the last 4 years, maybe?
Absolutely. There's a couple of different instances. One, the 2017 Jobs and Tax Cuts Act that gave, $2.2 trillion in tax cuts primarily to wealthy individuals and corporations and blew a hole in our budget deficit. That was rammed down the Democrats' throat via reconciliation. Also, the attempted repeal of the Affordable Care Act, was done via reconciliation and would have passed if not for that one thumb downs vote by John McCain, and who ever since has been derided in his grave by the former president.
Thank you, Kylan. So now that we have a pretty good understanding of what reconciliation is, do we think that Democrats are going to move forward passing the bill with that, or do you think they're still open to negotiations with Republicans? And I'll leave that as an open question to anybody. Tyler, you're muted.
Oh, am I muted?
It's 2021, and I'm still trying to figure out how to use the mute button.
Unbelievable.
I was going to say, of course, he's going to push it through. The Democrats are going to push it through. They just want to
via reconciliation, correct?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Okay, just make
reconciliation, because I mean it's what the other side would do if they were in the same position. One, two. Yes, Joe Biden wants unity and he wants to show some semblance of unity, but if they don't try to show any kind of unity on their side and like giving any substantial plan or bill or anything that, hey, let's meet halfway, maybe not 1.9, let's do $1 trillion. You guys are saying that you guys are spouting off on Twitter and on press releases saying that Joe Biden promised you $2,000. Well, the fact that you're not getting $2,000, you shouldn't get anything. It's like, that's not how this works. We need something for people. We need some relief to get schools back open, as we talked about before. We need to be able to have a better way of having distribution for vaccines, which we've talked about today. Basically, everything we talked about today needs to happen in this bill. It needs to happen sooner rather than later. Obviously, they need to play the political theater with it, which is one of the reasons why those who have not seen how a regular functioning government works are a little upset by it, but it'll pass through here in the next couple of weeks, and we just got to be patient with it.
So real quick, Kylan, before we get to you, I just want to let our audience know we've got a new poll up. Should the Democrats continue to negotiate with Republicans on the COVID-19 relief bill? I just put it up like no more than 20 seconds ago. We've already got 4 votes for no and 1 vote for yes. So just a quick update there. Now I want to go back to Kylan for this one. And Amanda, you're welcome to jump in after Kylan's finished here. I want to know what's in the bill that the Democrats have proposed, and how does it compare or differ to the one proposed by those moderate Republicans, namely Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Mitt Romney?
Yeah, that's a great question. Number one, that Republican bill was an insult and a joke. That in no way was bipartisan at all, and I'll tell you why. First, let's go to what's in Joe Biden and the Democrats' COVID-19 bill. It's a 1.9 trillion bill. It includes, I'm not going to go into specific numbers, but it includes around 500 billion for state and local governments, so they don't have to continue laying off teachers, firefighters, cops, public servants. It's a misnomer and very intellectually dishonest and disingenuous for Republicans to criticize these as blue state bailouts. This has nothing to do with unfunded pension liabilities or bad spending. This has to do with all state budgets being stretched to their limit by not having any revenues due to lockdowns and the COVID-19 pandemic. Because there's also plenty of Republican states that are having those same budget crunches that are doing the exact same thing, and I don't see them criticizing those states. It also has money for schools so they can reopen safely, including having PPE, proper ventilation, social distancing, so kids can get back to school. It includes $1,400 checks, as well as $500 for each qualifying child. It includes a $3,000 enhanced child tax credit that Democrats actually want to make refundable, that will provide the American people, parents, with money every month to help reduce child poverty by about half. It raises the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And, so it's a very robust bill. So now we contrast that to the Republicans' bill, which is approximately $614 to $618 billion, basically less than a third the size of the Democrats' bill. It doesn't have $1,400 checks, it has $1,000 checks. It reduces the income threshold so less people will be eligible for the lower checks. It includes less money for school reopening. It has no minimum wage because Republicans are against raising the minimum wage. It contains no funding for state and local governments because remember, Republicans disingenuously say that it's a blue state bailout. So, it totally doesn't meet the need of the moment. It does not meet the gravity of the situation. Mind you, the conservative Republican governor of West Virginia, Jim Justice, has said to go big and endorses this bill.
He was originally a Democrat, by the way.
That's a great point. He was, but he's a Republican.
He only was a Democrat so he could get elected.
Fair, which is true.
All right, I had to interject because that's very personal for me.
Hey, I appreciate that. So he said to go big. Bipartisan groups of mayors, have said that agree with the Democrats' bill. You want to talk about bipartisan? The Democrats and Joe Biden's COVID-19 bill is bipartisan because it's supported by the vast majority of the American people. Democrat, Republican, Independent. They support checks. They support raising the minimum wage. They support money for schools. They support state and local governments because these people in these communities know that their teachers, that their cops, that their firefighters are getting laid off. It hurts their communities. And so, that's why I have no problem with Democrats going alone through reconciliation. Joe Biden made a good faith effort to meet with these Republican senators to hear them out, and they responded in kind by producing a shit bill that is in no way bipartisan, in no way trying to bridge the divide, and in no way trying to have any sort of middle ground.
Well, we were at 0 on our swear counter, and now we've got 1. So
I think that's pretty darn. I think that's.
Hey, I was just trying to see if we could go 1 episode without swearing at all, but that's never going to happen. Let's be real. So, this is an open question, another open question to the panel here. With this bill, I mean, it seems like most of us believe that that the Biden administration is done negotiating with Republicans on this one. When do you think we can see a vote? When do you think we could see checks? What do you guys think?
I'm not going to see a check, so I don't know.
First week of March.
Yeah, into February, first week of March, and then
for what, the bill or for checks?
Oh, the bill should be signed into law into February, first week of March. We should start seeing checks about a week and a half to 2 weeks after that.
So to expand on that, why the gap? It's the 11th of February now. Why is it taking so long to get to that vote if Democrats clearly have the votes?
They're a little distracted right now.
Yeah, there's a few things. The current impeachment hearing, still having to get a whole
confirmations,
confirmed, and the simple fact that when you're doing a reconciliation bill, it takes a lot longer because it has to stick to that strict budgetary guideline, and all of the relevant committees are working on separate tracks, and then have to bring all of those individual parts of the bill together to reconcile them, then to vote on that. So it's a little bit more time consuming.
They also had to vote on 400 amendments overnight about their bill just to get it past the House, I think it was. So they've been a little busy.
Unbelievable.
Yes.
Unbelievably inefficient, at least in my view. But
this is how Republicans are trying to stall it, because they didn't. I think realistically, the Republicans wanted to stall it to have it happen after the impeachment trial.
Sure.
And so it delayed everything further, just so Joe Biden and the Democrats somehow lost clout. But I'll leave the rest of my point for the next 30 seconds.
Fair enough. Amanda, did you want to hop in real quick before we move on, or?
Just to say that I agree with Tyler. I think there are some delay tactics there, and with them wanting to drop the income threshold to even get the checks. I mean, imagine if that actually happened as a compromising point. All that would do is give the GOP critics more fodder to say, that Joe Biden is a failure
Yeah.
and is breaking his promises when they also demanded unity. And they think that bipartisanship means doing exactly what they want, when it really means listening to both sides and coming to an informed decision about how you want to proceed. And if that means you have people from both sides on board, great, but it's not a requirement. And so I just think this is just the tip of the iceberg. We're getting a little taste of all of the criticisms we're going to see over the next 4 years. Just like I think we said one time on here, like, that they're going to start immediately saying that he's entirely responsible for every COVID death after January 20th.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, right.
but hey, that's got to be true if Trump's the reason why the economy was so good. So, and not Obama.
Yeah. Fair enough. Well said. I wanted to move on next to the entire reason, or most of the reason, why the reconciliation bill is currently not being voted on, and that's what we've been dealing with all week: the impeachment trial, the second impeachment trial, which has never happened in history. Never in history has a president been impeached twice. So we're living through pretty interesting times right now. So to start us off,
interesting times.
So many interesting things that happened all January. I think we talked about this last podcast. Like
Grandma, tell us about 2020.
Oh
What
man,
a-
2021.
You know what's
And
funny?
2021.
I was talking to Jasmine about this yesterday. I told her, like, if somebody like slipped into a coma back in January of 2020 and just
that
awoke,
happened.
That happens.
But it wasn't January 2020. It was like 8 years ago. Like this kid ended up in a coma like 8 to 10 years ago.
No. There was also one that he went into coma in February of last year.
And so it's like they've slept through the pandemic. One guy in the coma got the Rona twice while he was
in the hospital.
While he was in a coma, he got the Rona twice from healthcare workers. And now he's woke up in a world of masks and social distancing and staying inside. And I also think he probably has some cognitive deficits from being in a coma that long, but still, just imagine.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, okay, so that pretty much was what I was gonna say. I was we were talking about like, how would you explain what happened over the last year if somebody was in a coma and didn't know what the hell was going on?
Just imagine a series of Onion headlines that are real.
Oh my god, they have a field day with it. They have a field day with it.
That's the only way to explain it. But I there was also people that were like hiking the West Andes and stuff like that were gone for 6 months,
just
and they come back
off the grid
in December, and they're like, what happened to the world? I can't get back home.
Yeah.
Wow.
Or I get back home and where are all the people?
Sorry, I had to throw that in there.
No. I'm glad you guys did. I thought this was. I didn't realize this had actually this happened.
Yeah.
But
there was like a commercial early on in the pandemic with a similar premise where it was like this guy wakes up from a coma and people are trying to explain what's going on, but then they start arguing about something, and so he drips his medication so he can pass out.
You know what?
He'd rather be in the coma than deal with reality.
I've got an idea. I've got a great idea. For anybody, if anybody's watching that just woke up from a coma, just go back and watch all of our episodes of Project SIP, and you'll get filled in pretty quickly, right?
We're on YouTube.
Yeah.
There you go. We're on YouTube. Go find it.
Yeah, technically we're on YouTube.
Yeah. Okay, now let's move on. Now that I said I was, but so Trump's impeachment trial, the second impeachment trial of his presidency. So the first question I want to ask Amanda, and this is, there seems to be the prevailing question throughout the course of the impeachment is Trump's already gone. He's out of office now. Is it even constitutional to impeach a president that's left office? And for that, I want to go to Amanda for the legal perspective.
So I disagree with the first part. I don't think it's a pervasive question. I think it is a question that is basically the only thing that they could come up with as a possible defense first. And because senators don't want to deal with this again because they're over it. Everything's a big deal when it was Hillary's emails or Obama's tan suit and the fact that he put mustard on a hot dog, but they don't want to deal with a historic insurrection. Okay, we get it. Yes, it's constitutional. I think the House managers, the prosecutors of this impeachment did a great job laying out exactly why it's constitutional. And it goes back and if you'll allow me to elaborate, it goes back to historical precedent. So there's nothing in the Constitution that says when and under what circumstances an impeachment trial has to happen. But he was impeached during his presidency. And the very first time the impeachment power was used, it was against Senator William Blount in 1797. That's less than a decade after the Constitution was ratified. The Constitution was ratified in 1789, and 8 years later, they're impeaching someone. They did his trial after he left office. So just from the very start of our beautiful constitutional republic, they impeached someone while he was in office. They expelled him from the Senate. Then they did an impeachment trial, and he was acquitted.
Tyler, Tyler was trying to talk, I think. You were muted though, bud.
No, I wasn't saying anything.
Oh, okay.
And then, yeah.
Go ahead.
And then I can't do math, so my brain is telling me that it's 80 years later or something, 1876. The Senate does it again. Secretary of War William Belknap resigns from the House. He's still impeached. He still stands trial after he's left his position. And there have also been several cases of federal district court judges being tried after they resigned, including former U.S. District Judge Samuel Kent in 2009. And lawmakers at the time said that his resignation did not affect the right of the Senate to hold a trial. And so it's completely disingenuous. There's no historical precedent. It's like saying, well, we can't, or we have to push the Amy Coney Barrett thing through Congress, through the Senate to confirm her, but we couldn't do that with Merrick Garland.
So
it doesn't make sense. Like, there's no constitutional foothold for it. Sorry, what's your question?
No. So that was a great explanation, by the way. To follow up on that, though, in light of all of this historical precedent for the idea that you can impeach a public official like that, what are the Republicans saying to counter it?
To counter that it's constitutional?
Correct.
I think from what I've seen, it's mostly been, they're just saying, well, he's gone. He's already out of office. It's not constitutional. What's the point? Well, the point is, once he is convicted by 2/3 majority, they only need a simple majority to say that he can't run again in 2024 or ever. Not that I think he's going to live long enough to run in the 2030s, but you never know. He's, clearly in very good health, according to his doctor.
Yeah.
I think maybe died of COVID, the doctor.
The interesting... Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, finish.
Sorry, I was just going to say, if conceptually it's hard for people to understand, I want to analogize it really quickly to something that we deal with in our job, in my job. So when people are placed on probation and are accused of committing a new crime or violating a term of their probation, the government has to file a petition to revoke their probation. If they don't do that before the probation term is up, then they can't violate the person, even if they broke every single rule in their probation. But if I'm on probation and they file a petition today to revoke my probation, even though it would expire tomorrow, they can still do my trial, the violation of probation hearing, after I'm off of probation. All that matters is that they impeached the president while he was still in office. That gives them a constitutional imperative and right to do a trial.
I got you. Okay. Yeah, exactly. Boom. Well said. It's
You can also talk about the First Amendment if you want me to.
That's what I was gonna say. It's literally their defense is that, and
that's the secondary defense. So wait, Alex, what was your other question? I'm so sorry.
I had it on the tip of my tongue and then just gone. So go ahead with what you guys were saying. Sorry.
I mean, like, I also think this is just going to be the Amanda show for the next little bit.
I love the Amanda Show.
We can't rename the podcast The Amanda Show because I feel like there's probably already one out
It's
there.
taken by Nickelodeon. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yep.
no, that was Amanda. No, yeah, that's right.
That was the
Yeah,
Amanda Show.
That was the Amanda Show.
I know because I used to really love that show as a kid.
I know.
Actually. Yeah.
Anyways.
That makes
But,
me question a lot of things about you, Alex.
About my childhood, maybe, but not who I am now.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, so I also think it's kind of disingenuous to just generally say, well, he has a First Amendment right. He has a First Amendment right. Because that's not, I mean, like, he's accused of violating an exception to the First Amendment. And on top of that, if you're just going to say, well, people can say what they want because First Amendment, yeah, we can. We have no influence. We have no power. We don't have the masses listening to us. I mean, as much as we would love them to, I guess, maybe one day we'll be popular. But we don't have the power of a president who can affect entire cultures and millions of people and influence them to, make major decisions in their lives, like let's throw everything away and storm the Capitol. I mean, if they were smart, if these attorneys, I'm not shocked that they're not doing well. They got this was a handoff trial, as we say in the business. But like, okay, it's your turn. Here's the whole file. Good luck. You got 2 days. But the real argument for them needs to be breaking down whether or not he committed incitement.
Mm-hmm.
For those who don't know, we talked about this in the last broadcast. You should definitely rewatch that if you haven't. But if you don't, incitement.
Go follow us on YouTube.
I know, go follow us on YouTube. So incitement, the definition of it comes from Brandenburg versus Ohio, Supreme Court case. They have to prove 2 things. 1, did Trump engage in speech that was directed at inciting or producing imminent lawless action? Mm-hmm. And 2, was his speech likely to produce that imminent lawless action? Mm-hmm. They only need to get rid of one of those, right? Like, so they can try to say, it wasn't likely to produce that action. That would have happened what he said was irrelevant to what was going to happen. And that's, I don't know if that's reasonable given the fact that the House managers have done a great job of laying out just the constant violence at Trump rallies and at Trump speeches and among his supporters and how he encourages that overall. And then the only other way I've seen them try to break down the first element of this is they're like, oh, but like, it's just one rally, just like one speech. And he didn't like specifically say it. But the House managers have been doing a great job of showing that this was not a one-off comment. This was a pattern of speech, whether it was rallies, television, like at the debate, stand back, stand by for the Proud Boys, to the way he was tweeting after, not just after the election, but after he had no more legal options to challenge the results of the election. I think they said that he tweeted 34 times that morning before he took the stage. And he was also retweeting stuff about sending the cavalry. It's not just he got up on a stage and he said something and that's what directed people to be incited and likely produce the incitement. It's a pattern of conduct. It's the totality of the circumstances. And so I think they've been doing a great job of laying out all of the times he has either personally promoted or advocated by retweeting things about, how this is going to be war, all the shit all the stuff he said about Mike Pence, because they did it, their timelining was great as well, because they're like, yeah, people are starting to storm the Capitol. People have been rushed off. Trump is aware of this, and he's still tweeting about Mike Pence.
Yeah.
He's still tweeting about people going to the Capitol.
And the only reason why we know that is
what he said on the stage. I'm sorry?
I was going to say the only reason why we know that is because of Tommy Tuberville.
Yeah.
It was so dumb. Oh my God.
Yeah. So, I mean, they don't have a good defense, and what defenses they have, they're not doing a good job of presenting those.
That guy Castor has become like a meme on Twitter after this whole
I almost feel bad for him, and I'm going to get flack for saying this, but I'm not surprised that a prosecutor doesn't know how to flip to defense really well. It's not really natural for them, in my opinion, unless they've already worked on the defense side. I don't think Castor has. And again, he got, not only is now he the defense, but he got a handoff trial. And in the first sentence in his opening statement, he called himself the lead prosecutor. You know, that was force of habit for him. You know, it's not, I mean, it's, as defense attorneys, we have to anticipate what the other side is going to say, how they're going to say it, how they're going to argue it. I call it putting on my prosecutor hat. I cross-examine my own clients. I know exactly what, you know, if I have a DUI trial, I know exactly what the prosecutor is going to argue. So it's easy for me to flip that. Yeah. And I feel like prosecutors often struggle with the defense aspect of things. I've seen that in the self-defense trials I've done where they struggle to emphasize why their victim didn't commit the crime I've now accused their victim of doing. So I'm not surprised he's struggling, because all he's doing is waxing poetic about, constituents and complimenting the senators, that's not a defense.
Oh, well said. Thank you for breaking that down.
Rant down.
Kylan is so fired up. Look at Kylan. He's so fired up right now.
It's just like, because I try to look at this like a defense attorney, because, because again, as a defense attorney, I can also look at things like a prosecutor, at least in some respects. And so I'm looking at the pattern of conduct. And if I'm just going to come in there as the defense attorney and go, oh, but it was like just one time, like that's not going to fly, at least in front of a normal jury.
I mean, the whole entire thing about it, and there are those, especially on the center right, that believe that the only reason why they want to impeach Trump is just so they can basically have this outside chance of preventing him from ever running for a federal office again. And it's like, no, let's put it this way. Do we want our political leaders to do what Trump did? Do we, if we want to look at what happened January 6th in Washington, in and around the Capitol, do we want that to happen? No, we don't want that to happen. We don't want our politicians to sit there for 8 months saying that an election was going to be rigged before the election even happened against them. We don't want our whole entire political traditions, as I said earlier, to be broken just because somebody thinks it's deserving of that, just because it doesn't fit what they want. These people all felt like they were doing it for Donald Trump. And a lot of them felt very, very, very betrayed. That's the word I was looking for. On the 8th, when Trump had to put out his little video tweet that basically said, oh yeah, I don't mean any of that. So, I mean, I know there are some people even in our comment section that kind of feel like this is only just for us to say that we want this impeachment to go through because of that. And it has nothing to do with it. It's more of, hey, this is a problem. We need to take care of it. This is not just something inflammatory that all politicians do, because not all politicians tell their people that we have to have a war. Not all politicians create an atmosphere where 70% of people that are in their party think that the other side is not just a political foe, but an enemy. I mean, that is a problem. That is an endemic problem that needs to be rectified. And the only way we can prevent people from doing this again in the future is to do another impeachment.
Thank you. Well said, Tyler. Real quick, before I get to the next question here, I want to go to the comment section here. And first off, I want to say we did put up a poll not too long ago. The question was, do you think Trump will be convicted by the Senate? Overwhelmingly, 5 of you said no, and 1 said yes. So if you're still watching, whoever the yes vote is, I want to hear from you, because I want some of whatever you're smoking personally.
There's only one person that has changed their vote from even figuring out if this was constitutional to do. That's the really crazy thing. Is this constitutional? You would think that most people, even on the right, would at least vote for that. But there was only 6 Republicans that voted for that, with all 50 of the Democrats. So and there's right now there's only one that says maybe I might change my vote, but we need 7 more. I think.
Yep.
Wait, math is bad.
No, we need
Math is
17
hard.
total.
17 total. So we need 10 more, right?
Or like 11. I don't
11, something like that. Math is
Oh.
hard, but you know
know. Math is
that
very hard.
So I think we addressed this point already with kind of what we just said here, but I want to bring it up anyways. Christopher Pleasant in the chat, and thank you for being so active tonight. We appreciate you tuning in. His question was, there have been plenty of politicians that have used inflammatory speech. So will they punish anyone that has used inflammatory speech? And for that, I want to go to Tyler. We basically addressed it already, but we'll...
Yeah, I kind of addressed it already. But I mean, when you use words like we need to liberate Michigan, we need to liberate California, when you say things, as I mentioned before, we need to go to war, we need to stand up and defend, we need to walk peacefully down to the Capitol when you've already said things like these people are going to take your rights, they're going to take away a fairly won election by me, even though I lost by 7 million votes. These people are not putting in the legally sworn in electors or whatever, just anything that is basically just completely batshit crazy. I mean, that was my one swear of the day, but it's crazy. And I think with this alternate reality that he's attuned these people to, it does become inflammatory because he's only doing it because it would benefit him. And it doesn't matter if that was a person on the right, the left, the center, wherever. They shouldn't have that kind of power to be able to do that. And they shouldn't be able to sit up on a podium and basically incite these people to do the things that were done.
Yeah, so I mean, I've seen a lot of people say online, oh, well, what about Maxine Waters? What about AOC? What about the things that they say? And there's a big difference. Yeah, Ilhan Omar, there's a big difference between their words and Trump's, because it's not just about a single tweet here or there. It's about a pattern of conduct that is directed at certain groups, certain people, calling for imminent lawless action, like liberate Michigan. And we saw, I would not be shocked that if some of those guys who tried to kidnap the governor of Michigan were to say they did it because Trump wanted to liberate Michigan. You know, I saw somebody today say, well, what about Obama calling out racism and police brutality, and then that black guy in Dallas shot all those police officers because he thinks all police officers are racists? And I'm like, the difference is he wasn't speaking directly to that man, and also didn't call for any violence, you know, or anything that could be even resembling violence, like go fight, or, you know, bring the cavalry, or it's, you know, have to go to war for your country. It's not the same. You have to break it down to those two elements.
Fight like hell, or you're not going to have a country anymore.
Yeah, you're not going to fight like hell. You're not going to have a country anymore. Like, it's the tone, it's the repetition, the constant messaging, as opposed to like, oh yeah, there's police brutality, so we need to fight for our rights, and you know, civil unrest is a natural part of oppressed people not being heard. You know, that's completely different. And I'm paraphrasing like a variety of politicians with that little recitation, but it's completely different than repeated messaging that you're going to lose everything and you need to fight back, literally fight back. This is war. Take your country back. It's totally different in terms of, if you look at the Brandenburg test, totally different.
I would just say, you know, I think we need to be careful about fake false equivalency. You know, because, you know, if we're going to let's compare apples to apples. Let's compare oranges to oranges. And I haven't seen a Democratic campaign rally where people are getting beat up and dragged out or getting punched. I haven't
Or
seen
calling for people to get kicked out.
exactly. I haven't seen a Democratic president contest an election and saying it was rigged. I haven't seen a Democratic president or presidential candidate incite an insurrection. I haven't seen a Democrat or Democratic candidate at least as much, incite people to go make bombs or to, plan to kidnap the governor of Michigan. Or, I've never seen a Democratic candidate say there were very fine people on both sides during Charlottesville when there's people, literally Nazis walking down the street in torches.
Yeah.
So you got to be careful of false equivalence, and we can't play that game. We got to call a spade a spade. Now, granted, are there wackos on the left out there? Of course, there's wackos in every demographic. There's wackos everywhere. But if we're going to talk about the speech and what's being done by specific candidates or sides of the aisle, there is no comparison. There's only one party whose base is batshit. There's only one party that contests elections. There's only one party that's actively trying to subvert and destroy democracy. So let's not get it twisted. That's all I'm saying.
I can say this. Kylan, he never said there was fine people on both sides because, the English language is murdered by, or was murdered by, our former president, in that he didn't actually say things. He said a lot without saying anything. And so,
Mob boss style.
yeah, mob boss style, which we won't get into that either. But, when you use the English language in the ways he does, it leaves a lot of ambiguity to where if you're on one side of the aisle in something, you would think one thing. If you're on the other, you think another. And with the way that everything is, in the way in this tornado of a shitstorm that he's created over the last 4 years, that basically created this whole entire narrative in this belief on this side that everything that Trump's saying is basically gospel.
Mhm.
And obviously that comes from QAnon too. That didn't help things. But when you have places where you don't have people that have any differing opinions at all, even though I feel like most Americans are kind of in the middle on a lot of things, when you're only hearing far right ideals, you're just going to be brainwashed to it, especially when you can talk out of both sides of your mouth and say things without actually saying it.
Well said. Want to move on to the next question. So in the beginning, right before the trial was slated to take place, Mitch McConnell signaled an openness to potentially voting to convict and hearing out the evidence. And it's in stark contrast to the first impeachment trial, where it was pretty much like understood from the very beginning that we're all of us Republicans, we're going to vote no. We're out on this one. So given that, do you think McConnell can or will whip the votes to convict? And do you think he himself will vote yes?
No.
I don't think he's going to whip up the votes to convict unless he votes yes. But I don't necessarily. My
Well, so there's a difference there, right? So he can vote his conscience and vote yes, right? But it's a whole different thing to actually go in there and whip everyone to vote.
Yeah.
Yes. So is it a situation where he will tell everyone, "Hey, go ahead and vote your conscience. My conscience says vote yes," or will he tell everybody "Hey, we gotta set a precedent and save the Republican Party"?
He's not going to do that.
Well, and here's the thing too: when he's saying vote with your conscience, follow your moral conscience, that's not just him coming up with that phrase. That's a phrase that's been used in constitutional law generally. When we go into, people talk about, well, why don't you just try him in criminal court? Why don't you just sue him? Each of those types of proceedings have different standards of evidence. We have preponderance of the evidence in lawsuits. We have beyond a reasonable doubt in a criminal court. There's no standard for impeachment other than the moral conscience of the senators. That's the standard. So that's very specific messaging. He's not telling them what to do. He's saying, vote with your moral conscience, do what you think is right. There's no specific standard here. And I don't think that that's necessarily going to mean that more people actually vote to convict.
Well, most GOP senators have no conscience to utilize. I mean, just this evening, Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, and Lindsey Graham had a meeting with Trump's lawyers. So impartial jury, my ass. That's just despicable. But I mean, we all knew that Trump was not going to be convicted. I mean, I would like some of whatever one of our viewers was smoking when they said that they would convict. I would like some because it would make me feel really good.
We
Um,
and we had one more person vote for no, so we were up to 6 votes on no, but still only 1 vote for yes, and nobody's come out in the comments and owned it yet. So
I want that, but he's not going to be, acquitted. Sorry, convicted. And I just think I think it's a shame. I think the evidence has been overwhelming. I think the House impeachment managers have been masterful. And you know, and I know that these Republican senators they were all running for their lives, just like the Democratic senators were. So they knew what the hell happened on the 6th. But you know, you know, nowadays with modern medicine, they would need a surgical procedure to remove their head from out of Trump's ass. And so that's perfectly understandable, And so, again, I think this is going to be for the voters to decide in 2022 for whichever senator is up for reelection that they have to be held, either they'll be held accountable or they won't. But my hope is that with this masterful performance by the House impeachment managers, that whoever among the American people who haven't been able to tune in to know the full extent of what Donald Trump did, I hope they're able to internalize this and use this going forward to make the best voting decision that they can.
thank you, Colin. Well said. One of the things you said broke Tyler for a second there, but I think he's back now. So
I came back to life.
he came back to life. Good. Well, I think the last question I've got on this impeachment here is, what do you guys think the vote is going to turn out? How many Republicans vote yes?
Oh God.
I think
say maybe
overall-
Oh, sorry, Tyler, you first.
I was going to say overall it's going to be 60.
Wait. Overall, it has to be 60, or overall 60 will vote yes?
60 will vote yes. So we're going to miss it by 7.
Yeah, I'm around there too, and it's unfortunate. But it's reality, and some people are like, well, then why have an impeachment at all? And I'm like, well, historical precedent. I said it before, I'll say it again. If this isn't worth going through this process for and laying out all the evidence and showing the American people what he did wrong, then anything goes for any president in the future. Anything goes.
Just remember, Bill Clinton was impeached over a blowjob.
Well, not even over a blowjob, over lying about a blowjob.
And Lindsey Graham was the lead House impeachment manager during that impeachment. And Lindsey Graham sure as hell made a strong case for the moral case to impeach him, to cleanse the office. So
Yeah.
and Lindsey Graham still has orange Cheeto dust on his upper lip.
What is?
Well, I mean, Lady G is not out of the closet, so let's not out her.
Oh God! All
But
I love them
yeah, I don't
butterflies.
know. It's
Or ladybugs. It was ladybugs.
Yeah, it's
It's
just the
after dark,
historical
guys.
precedent is too important, and it's also really wild because that whole it's not constitutional argument just kind of, sorry, I know I'm talking about this again, but
No, go ahead.
it lends to the argument of like, well, if a president can just be voted out in their first term and do whatever the heck they want over the next 2 months, imagine the damage somebody can cause without consequences. And so that's why we need a precedent here. And it's sad that they're not going to convict, but it's going to be in the history books either way.
Well said. And on
Yay,
that
history.
and on that note, I don't think we have a fun topic for tonight.
We had a lot of fun with the topics.
We
How
had a
about
lot
that?
of, you know what, that's just it. We had a lot of fun with the topics, and we had 87 comments tonight. We really enjoyed having you guys watch us tonight and interact with the broadcast. So with that, I want to call it right there and say, thanks for joining us. Have a great night, everybody. Take care.
Be sure to like and follow.
Yes, please. And follow us on YouTube.
Subscribe on YouTube. Subscribe,
bye.
Alex.
Bye.
Sure, whatever. All right, guys. We'll see you on the next one.